Well, good evening, everyone. Meteorologist Michael Wilhite here with Southern Indiana Weather. Thanks for logging on to my latest forecast video update, folks. We have a chance of some severe weather next week. I've talked about that a little bit on Facebook. Not been too active on the weather page this week. It's been kind of a quiet week, so I've slowed down. That's going to change next week, folks. We've got some active weather coming on the way again, and it's going to come in the form of some very warm weather that's going to lead for the chance of some severe weather, possibly even temperatures pushing into the 60s in the beginning of February. Which anytime you're going to get into the 60s, folks, in the beginning of February, you almost always know that that's going to spell trouble. Here, the Storm Prediction Center has already outlined an area here in the yellow for a slight risk of severe weather on Tuesday. This is Groundhog Day. Now, the severe weather event really starts on Monday, but not for us. It'll start back down here around Arkansas with the potential. But then by the time you move into Tuesday, you get this risk coming on. Better chances are down to our south, where you already have an enhanced risk being progged there. But that slight risk does extend into part of us. And to be completely honest, I would not be surprised at all to see that slight risk be extended more northward, sort of like this in coming updates. But we will just have to see how things go. This setup does remind me at least a little bit of the December 23rd severe weather event that we had around here. And we did have some storms and some warnings out of that. Could we get it out of this? Well, it's not a guarantee, but it's certainly a possibility. Let's dive into the data and talk about it and see what we can expect out of this, folks. Let's take a look at, first off here at your weather map. A quiet period here coming up the next couple of days. In fact, we're going to warm up into the 50s tomorrow. We'll bottom out tonight, not much further from where we're at right now. We're going to bottom out in the low to mid 30s across the area. But we'll warm to the mid to upper 50s tomorrow around the area, even pushing 60 by Sunday. That's going to be quite nice. Tomorrow won't be a bad day. We'll start to increase the clouds as we head a little bit later on into the day. By the time Sunday comes, though, that we've got some showers that begin to move into the area. We'll go with about a 50% chance of showers at this point. High temperature should be in the upper 50s, even to pushing the near 60 around the area. Again, those showers continue possibly into the overnight hours. But then as that moves out, it looks like we dry out for Monday. Monday looks like a little bit cooler day behind that first cold front. We'll still be in the 50s, but we'll drop down to the lower 50s the way thing looks. But watch this storm system out here to the west. As this moves our way, that's going to be our big weather maker. And you can see it's a very powerful low pressure. In fact, it's going to leave a pretty hefty swath of snow on the northwest side of it. Now, we are not on the northwest side of it. And of course, the reason for that, by the way, if we just take a look at our friend, the North Atlantic Oscillation, the NAO. Remember when we got that winter storm? What happened here? We were in the negative during that. We are in the positive phase of the NAO right now. So because you've got a positive NAO, it's not going to cut to the south of us and go up the coast. It's going to be one of these situations that low deepens real fast, and it's going to start to go to the north, and so we stay on the warm side of it. That's what you typically get whenever you have a positive NAO like that around here. So very typical pattern, and it's a very much a strong system as well. We've got a 995 low out here. By the time you get to about 1 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, that's knocking on our door. It doesn't really start to get heavy, though, until you start to get in that night where the low continues to deepen, and you can see that it starts to go, what we say, poleward. That low starts to lift towards the north as we go. Let me dive into that a little bit further here. Let me just zoom it down to our area. There that low is as it comes in from Missouri, and here we are at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning, according to the GFS. Here we are by about 1 p.m. There is the heavy snow up in Iowa and places towards there. It's not going to affect us. That low cuts right through Illinois. It's going to be a 992 low. And look at the precipitation shield that we could potentially have in here. We could be looking at a potential of a squall line to come through here. That's just something that we're going to have to see. As it looks to me right now, what we would call a QLCS, a quasi-linear convective system, or squall line in other words, that looks like it's probably going to be the most favored thing for us. Think damaging wind gusts would be the strongest risk for us really at this point. Can't rule out tornadoes. We'll look into the data and you'll see that, but it's not the strongest risk for us, I think, at this point. Damaging winds, if we get anything. It very well could just be some gusty winds at the surface with some heavy rain coming in. That's certainly one option that's on the table, but I do think there is a chance for at least some stronger storms to fire with some damaging wind gusts. Especially, let's look at the data, let's start to dive in it. So here we are, we're at the 500 millibar levels, and we're looking here at spin in the atmosphere, and we're about 40,000 feet up into the atmosphere, and there's good spin. So not only do we have and we expect that when we've got a pretty deep low pressure right beside of us, that's going to provide the lifting mechanism that we need, that forcing mechanism to fire those storms off. All right, so let's take a look at winds. You need a lifting mechanism in order to fire off the storms, but then you need wind, speed, and you need instability, and that's your basic three ingredients that you have to have really to get severe weather. Well, we've got the lifting mechanism, the forcing mechanism, very good forcing over the area. Very good wind energy over the area too. In fact, the yellow shading here indicates winds 105 knots or greater out to our west. This would be about 100 knot winds over us. Those winds are going to be screaming. In fact, all you're going to have to do is look up at the clouds. They will be moving quite fast that day. We take that down a little bit further, and we go down to about 4,000, 5,000 feet up into the air, and you've got a low-level jet right over us that's screaming as well. Now, it's the same color table, but notice the difference in the speeds down here. This time the yellow is indicating maybe a 65 to 70 knot wind. That's pretty impressive for winds just 4,000 feet or so above our heads. So you've got 100 knot winds way up into the atmosphere. You've got 65 knot winds. Even winds down here to the surface look pretty impressive as well. We're talking even winds 25 to 30 miles per hour gusting here at times. So that's not as if it's going to be it's going to be pretty breezy down here as well. The other thing I want you to know, when we look at shear, wind in the atmosphere, we're looking at speed shear definitely. You're going from 100 knots at the top of the atmosphere to 30 knots or so at the bottom, and here about 4,000 or 5,000 feet up about 65 to 70 knots. That's very good wind shear, speed shear wise. You've also got directional shear going on. Notice winds here down at the surface. Let's just look at this barb right here. You notice it's almost coming out of due south direction. You go up to about 4,000 feet and you're right about the south direction here. Go up to this level though and you're out of the southwest, so there's a slight tilting of those winds, and of course you need that tilting of those winds if you're going to get tornadoes out of it. So it is not something that we can rule out, but I think if we get anything, it's probably going to be more of a squall line kind of setup where we get some just brief spin ups embedded in it, sort of what we saw back on December 23rd as well. If we can get something, it looks like that may be what it ends up being here. Now, let's talk about the other major ingredient that you need, and that is the instability. Well, temperatures soar to near 60 degrees by that afternoon around the area. Dew points soar as well. You're looking at dew points in the upper 50s. That's a lot of moisture for this time of the year. Precipitable water, there it is. And so you would think, well, that ought to lead you to plenty of instability. For this time of the year, it will. If you look at the CAPE, the convective available potential energy, though only you can barely see it as some light shades of gray sort of right around here. Not much really going on. But keep in mind what this map is showing is surface-based instability. You got to actually go into the sounding and look up into the atmosphere. And I know this graphic's a little confusing, but what I really want you to focus on is right down in here. So we're going to look at these CAPE numbers here, but we're going to look down at different levels. And yes, here at the surface, we've only got 11 units of CAPE, but by the time you go up into the atmosphere, you're talking maybe 229 units of CAPE up there. That would certainly be more than enough instability in the atmosphere. So the question is, what kind of a threat do we have? Well, this particular sounding that I'm using from Pivotal Weather, which is a great site to get free data from the GFS model, marginal severe is its possible hazard type. And I would agree with that. I think that's a pretty good. I don't think this is one of those kind of severe weather events that you just look at it and you say, oh my gosh, we're going to have an absolute tornado outbreak, you better build a shelter now kind of things. But I don't think it's one that we can look at and say it's probably just going to be heavy rain and write it off. Do you think that there is a good chance that we could see some warnings out of this for strong wind gusts? Might even get to see a tornado warning or two for some very brief spin-ups, but I don't think it's going to be the worst that we've ever seen. I'm not looking at a March 2nd, 2012 Henryville tornado sort of outbreak kind of thing around here. I think this is just going to be a pretty typical winter severe weather event where we get a squall line most likely moving through with some damaging winds, severe thunderstorm warnings for up to 60 miles per hour winds, maybe isolated up to 70. That's kind of the thinking. Hail doesn't look very impressive to me at this point. I think it's going to be more of a wind threat than anything with a secondary tornado threat. You can't rule out some minor flooding going on as well with the heavy rains coming through. So I would not look at this. And by the way, timing wise, we're going to have this late evening again, the way things look. I would say at this guesstimate for right now, I would say anytime from about 5 to midnight looks like the optimum time for some severe to roll through us right now. But hey, this is only Friday as I'm recording this video. We got Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to go through before we even get to Tuesday, the day of the event. Lots can change, so of course I'll keep you updated this weekend with that. It's not one of the worst events that we've ever had around here, but it's certainly one that makes us do a double look. We'll put it that way. All right, really quickly here, let's move on and let's talk about the rest of the month, because this powerful cold front, temperatures in the 60s, it ain't gonna last long. Let me show you that. Let me go ahead and show you this first, I think, before we get into the indices. This is looking at temperature anomalies. This is how warm these really warm shades are strong above normal. The bluer shades are the below normal. That's really what you need to know to read this. Watch as we go into this weekend and we start to get those strong shades of red over us well above normal temperatures, especially at the time you get here on Sunday when you're talking temperatures near 60 degrees. That's way above the 38, 39 degrees, maybe 40 that we should be at around this area. That hangs around for a few days, and by the time you get here into Tuesday evening, you're still at that. But notice what's coming off to the west. There's that cooler weather starting to move in, and we will get some of those blues to come back on us. In fact, by the time you head into next weekend, we are sort of in that. But you notice every once in a while we'll get a day here or so where you get that blue starts to weaken, and you start to get just a little bit warmer than normal here. And then it looks like you get another kind of a setup where you can get some strongly warm coming in. By later in the month, it looks like we get some strongly colder than normal temperatures come in. How long will that last? Well, not really all that long, according to the GFS, until we start to get nice and toasty here again before another shot potentially comes in. So the point of me just showing you all that, folks, is that right now, at least the first half of February, the cold, and it looks very transient to me at this point. I do think we're going to see some colder weather come in behind these cold fronts, but it doesn't look like it's going to be the kind of cold weather that lasts, and the indices show that. Remember, we look at the Arctic oscillation for that, the AO, and the Arctic oscillation, that is cold air on the move down from Canada. And notice right here, yes, you have more of a negative trend, but all of these individual red numbers here, by the way, are ensemble members and individual model member. And notice that the trend, rather, of this, the trend here is to keep this on the positive side. You've got a couple of members that are down here into the negative, seeing things, but most everybody is up here into the positive on this. That's going to make those cold shots be a lot more transient. And of course, with the NAO staying positive, none of the members taking it negative at all. Remember, a negative NAO closes the North Atlantic down and says, hey, you've got to stop. And what it stops the storms, it slows them down. What that happens is it puts a roadblock in there, and it can bottle up that colder weather. So that could force an AO to go negative if you get a negative NAO with it, but it stays positive. So you're going to have these kind of transient sort of things where you start to see a dip in it. Doesn't really go down very strongly negative here, but it starts to go back up if it even goes negative at all. By the way, you can get colder weather here. Let me say this, even if the AO is in the positive side, but you're going to get very transient cold weather. You're not going to get a cold weather that lasts and stays when it's in that positive phase. PNA stays positive throughout the period, so we've got that trough set up over us rather than in the west, and that's a favorable setup for cooler weather, but you don't have the other two indices green right now. And here's the reason why. Here's what you've got go on. Here is our look at the polar vortex. So the polar vortex right now is sort of elongated, but it's starting to strengthen a little bit. It's retreated back up more towards the North Pole. It's starting to tighten up again. And let's take a look at what it does over time. So here we are right now. Here we are by the time we get to Tuesday. And you see, you've got a pretty strong polar vortex going on. And you've got a pretty decent ridge going on here. But watch as we get in later in time. Remember, when you have a strong polar vortex, it stays up at the pole. It doesn't allow that colder weather to come back in. Later on in the month, though, what looks like it's going to happen is that we got some strong heating going on up in here around Alaska and into Siberia. And this heating towards the poles is really going to take its toll. So by this time, we've got a very strong polar vortex going on up here. And that would certainly keep the cold air bottled up there. But watch what happens as you get this warming in. we go a little bit further in time and this warming isn't impacted it so much, now it's starting to elongate again. And of course, that could spill, that could mean a negative AO, that could spill that colder air over us. By the time you get to the end of the modeling, it is an all-out polar vortex split into two different lows, with one of those lows reaching close down to us and providing us what could be some very bitter cold weather to end February and go into March. Now, of course, that depends on this modeling being right. And if you followed me for a very length of time, you know, always be skeptical of models. Which one is lying to you the least is typically, whenever you look at the models, what you need to say to yourself. So does this end up happening? Well, we don't know at this point, but it's something that's on our radar screen. But until this happens, until we get the polar vortex weak enough that it starts to come back south, whether it's a true split or whether it's just sort of elongated like this, you're going to have very transient cold weather. So you're going to have a warm trend and a little bit of a cold snap, and a warm trend and a cold snap. So that's just something that we're going to have to work out. But the indices right now, by the way, this only goes out to February the 15th here. And of course, by the time you get out into here, you are, well, this is the 14th that this is looking at. So, but the indices not seeing it going down yet, but we will see. This is the deterministic GFS. This is basing it off of the ensembles. Sometimes there are some differences in that. So we'll see in the coming days what it does, but I do think that there will be chances for cold weather the later on we get into February, if that warming event, that sudden stratospheric warming that we see coming up here, that heat ridge building all the way up into Alaska, creating that big ridge over there, troughing over us, and we've got the polar vortex splitting enough to allow some, or elongating enough at least to allow that negative AO, allow some of that cold air to filter down. That's when we could get our snowstorms around here. So right now, nothing looks overly impressive for me for snowstorms. Now, there is a chance that by the time this exits out that we get cool enough for some flurries on the backside of the system on Wednesday as everything is exiting. Beyond that, we've got some more clippers that might move through that could give us the chance of some light snow showers around the area, but we don't really get anything big developing yet. There's a storm right around the 9th through the 10th. Right now, the models are keeping it well to our south and out of the area. We will see. So the GFS just not really showing anything big for us to look out for at this point. Of course, that could change. We'll keep an eye on it, folks. But the bottom line is the pattern right now, the indices that we are seeing, not really favorable for winter weather for us just yet. I do think that's going to change the later on we head into February, especially if we get this kind of a look into the upper levels of the atmosphere. But we're going to have to be patient. Those of you wanting winter, folks, you wanting a big snowstorm, it's just not going to happen for the way the first half of February, the way things are looking to me right now. The last half of February may be a completely different story if we can get this, but we'll have to take it one step at a time. All right, folks, that is it for this video update. Severe weather possible on Tuesday. Just keep weather aware. I'll have more for you this coming weekend. I'm meteorologist Michael Wilhite. Have a great night, folks.